If you're looking to level up your UX, content, or product design practice to confidently and joyfully tackle complexity, ask the million-dollar questions, and design digital systems that actually work, you are so in the right place. Welcome to the UX Level Up podcast. I'm Sophia Prater, and for over a decade, I've been teaching professionals how to make the most valuable and often invisible parts of UX gloriously visible. We will untangle the structure beneath the surface before jumping into screens, saving time, money, and headaches, and having so much fun doing it. Together, let's UX collaboration, break down silos, and build shared understanding that sets everyone up for success. Let's become the systems thinkers that our teams, and quite honestly, the world, are so desperately craving. Let's level up our practice and redefine what it means to be a UX designer. Let's jump into it. Ryan and Kayla, welcome to the UX Level Up podcast.
Hi, happy to be here.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. I'm so happy to have y'all. So for those that do not know, Ryan Young and Kayla Ferris work together at P3 Plus Uplift, which is an IT consulting firm in Des Moines, Iowa. So Ryan, you are a certified OOUX strategist and senior director of product and design. And Kayla, also certified OOUX strategist, soon to be advanced OOUX strategist, as well as a UX and product designer and cohort 11 mentor, which is super exciting. And Ryan, I've got my eyes on you for cohort 12 to come back and be an advanced.
I should definitely be able to do that by then.
Yes. Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, Ryan, am I making this up? Did you have a fourth child or something during the cohort?
That's funny. Kayla knows my childhood event or my children adventures. No, I only have two kids, but I was having my second kid. Well, I wasn't. My wife was having the second kid, which is enough for me.
So 2 kids is like 4 kids. It's like an entire circus of children. It was like I remember you were like so on time with all the assignments. You were like the first to submit everything because you were like, baby is coming, baby is on the way.
Yeah, which I know we'll probably get to in the future. But yeah, if anyone out there is like, oh, it's not the right timing, like just jump into it, because I was already a father, but about to have my second child coming into I think like right before week, 8 or 9 or something like that was when he was born. So I was like, anytime's the right time. Just gotta jump into it.
I love hearing that you said that, and shout out to A Hart, who just joined for cohort 11. He is also expecting, I think, his second or maybe his first. So he's expecting a kid as well. And he was like, it's crazy. I just started a new job and I'm having a baby and I'm joining the certification. But I actually am talking to somebody else on Instagram right now, answering some questions about the certification. They're like, I think I'm going to do it next year. There's so much going on right now. And I'm like, don't wait another year. You'll make the time back. You'll save time in the long run. It'll be a tough fall. But then, yes, you will be saving your time in all the rework and the fun other without the professional certification. Cool. So by the time this episode airs, probably cohort 11 doors will be closed. Kayla, you'll be deep in mentoring. But if you are interested in getting on the wait list, go to OOUX.com/certification, and you can be on the wait list for next year, for 2026. So remind me, Kayla, you're 2 years ago. Ryan, were you in the same cohort as Kayla?
No, I was 2 after her, I believe. She was 6.
Yeah, I was cohort 6. So it was like spring 2022.
Oh my gosh, you were early.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
I feel like that long ago. Really doesn't at all. So Ryan, you were last year, right?
2023. I was in cohort 9.
Okay, wonderful. So tell me about this journey. So starting with you, Kayla, how did you find OOUX? What was going on? I think you were not at P3 yet, were you? Or were you already at P3? And how did you find OOUX?
Yeah, so I found out about OOUX, I think actually through the UX Hustle Summit. And so when I started at P3 Plus Uplift in fall of 2021, it was with my first client that I started to see some of those common pitfalls that I knew OOUX would have been able to help us avoid and help us avoid the rework of. And a combination of that and just being like early in my career and feeling like I had the tools in my tool belt, but didn't have like the structure to my process that I was looking for. Those two things, I was like, okay, I want to be able to be a part of the solution next time so these things don't happen again, and just like have more structure to what I'm doing. So that, caused me to take the plunge and get certified. And now I do OUX with all of my clients. It's basically just how I think now.
It's hard to unsee. So what kind of things, Kayla, were you running into when you say, I didn't want these things to happen again? Like, what happened?
Yeah, so with that first client, they're in the health tech space. So we were dealing with objects like patients and caregivers and doctors and appointments. And like 3 or 4 months in, we go, can a caregiver have more than one patient that they're the primary caregiver for? Because there was like a whole separate app for the caregivers. And we were like, oh, yes, they can. And so we ended up having weeks of rework to redesign this, not just the experience, but like the system itself to be able to handle those kinds of relationships. But if we had used OUX and the ORCA process and asked that question up front, it would have saved us all of that time. And just that one thing, I was like, oh, it could have just not happened.
I know,
and everything would be fine.
The R of ORCA is going to force that question right to the surface when you start doing an nested object matrix. And that's so funny. It was just a question of cardinality. Is it a has one or is it a has many? And it can totally change your design. It can totally change the user experience. I remember the one like that, it's happened so many times where there's like these cardinality issues, but the one that I remember, and I'm so glad that you remembered that. Look, mine was also in healthcare, and it was a doctor having multiple locations. And the current system, the doctor just had the one, like the location was an attribute. So it was just the doctor has that one, there was like the one little field and you would add the location. And we were like, does that actually work for people? Because I was thinking about my dad and I was like, he would go to 3 different locations. And then I was thinking, now with telehealth, like some doctors actually have 0 locations, or does online even count as a location? Does that matter? Are we talking like, how do you define location? Is it a physical building? So if it's 0, what does that even mean? And it just opened up all these questions. And we realized we actually got to go into some user research and realize all the hacks that people were doing to make multiple locations work. And we were like, so it's so funny to watch the hacks. I forgot what they were actually. I think it was they were going and they were changing their location like every day. It was like, this is the location that I'm at today. And so we had this, they can add multiple locations, and then they can even add a schedule for that. So here's where I'm on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm at this location, and Tuesday and Thursday I'm at this location. And it was so common. It was like something like 40% of doctors were changing location. This was not even an edge case really. And it was a simple cardinality. I mean, it was cardinality. It was also defining what location even meant. And then also like kind of upgrading it from an attribute. But and that was in production, right? So they had production software because they didn't ask that question. So sometimes it's in your own design work where you have to do a bunch of rework, or sometimes it's like you just see it in the existing software and you're like, man, I don't know if that's right. So you brought OUX to P3?
Yeah. Yep. I was the first one to establish that, because I was there like a year and a half, I want to say, before Ryan joined us.
Cool. So Ryan, when Kayla started talking about OOUX, had you ever heard of it before? Was this a new thing? What were your first thoughts?
Oh yeah, no, I knew about OUX. I first heard about it, or I read the article in A List Apart, and that was super interesting because at the time you were talking about things that I was experiencing in the CMS-driven space. We kept having conversations around like page templates and how can we reuse these components? Like I create this one thing, but it should exist on this other part over here. And how do I share content among different parts of these websites? And I think at that point in time, like CMS-driven websites were so like kind of restrictive, and there's certainly new things that were coming out with CMSs, like Drupal and WordPress were experimenting with different things, but we didn't have like the whole concept like that Webflow has right now or anything like that. So I was just kind of fascinated by that article and trying to understand, like trying to pick it apart and try to apply it even in that stage.
And it was really, sorry to interrupt, but just to jump in, it was really like in CMSs that you were working with, it was really the R of ORCA, the relationships, right? That it was hard to like suck content in to nest it over here or nest it over here. Was that programmatic relationships? Was that what was missing?
It was that, but it was also the content modeling or the database modeling aspect of it as well. Like we'd have, we'd design the mock-up of the website for the CMS page on the front end, but then we'd like, okay, well now what data do we need? And sometimes we wouldn't even account in those designs of like, well, we need an ID, we need all the other programmatical things that you need to capture on the CMS side. So that really kind of got me like all these different parts of my brain and different like parts of UX or design in general were starting to overlap. And I was like, okay, I kind of see this could be used. And then from there, I was kind of kept trying to follow along with how OUX is progressing and some of the different articles you kind of came out with. And then not until many years later, after I left Accenture, so we're an Accenture alumni together. So you were there before I was, but yeah. So yeah, we definitely have some pain points around some of those projects as well, like kind of jumping into those client projects. But after I left there, yeah.
That was for me. Get
Yeah.
dropped in. Hella complexity. And they're
Yeah.
like, good luck.
Yeah. I definitely wish I would have had the certification stuff kind of around then, because I think a lot of this would have, as we use now, like would have got sussed out. But then when I was first sort of in-house role was where I was trying to adopt OUX because we were doing design system work. And I think like at the same time that your conversation with Dan Mall had just come out, maybe it was Brad Frost, maybe it was both of them. And I was like, oh, this is like perfect timing. And so in a way, I was trying to reverse engineer your Orca process without having, you didn't have all the resources you had back then. So I was trying to reverse engineer your Orca process and like trying to teach my team members like how we could use this for our work and then evangelize it to the UX team. So then when I came to P3, skipping ahead, that was the first time, because every time I would talk to somebody about it, they would like, I don't understand what we're talking about. Or like, oh yeah, like I've never really heard about that. But then I came to P3, like Kayla was the first person who was like, we get each other. Like we're equally nerdy about this thing. So I was like, I found my people finally.
Tell me more about Kayla. Do you remember that moment? Tell me more about when you were both like, what?
Well, yeah. So I remember when we were hiring him and they like told me they'd picked him or whatever. And up until then, all of my managers had always been women. So I was like, oh, a guy. But I saw that he had like an OUX specific like project on his portfolio. And I was like, oh, maybe this guy's okay.
You're a dude, but you redeemed yourself.
Yeah, so it was like really exciting. Because it had been like a little bit difficult to try. Like I had some coworkers when I talked about it, like got it and it made sense to them. But some people, it was like harder for them to get. So kind of that buy-in hadn't like been as robust until Ryan showed up. And then, yeah, we just kind of spun off in our geeky OUX world. And now everyone has to know about it.
That's amazing. Like I hope everybody listening here's this. Like if you are the sole OUXer at your company, that's tough. It's hard. Some people are going to get it. Some people are not going to get it. But getting one more person in, right? One more person can help kind of you'll become so much greater than the sum of your parts. So if you are hiring, make sure to post your job to the forum under the job post and the job board so that you can get other OUXers into your company and really kind of have a little bit more clout and muscle when it comes to getting it adopted. So, okay. So what does it look like at P3 now? What are you working on and kind of how is OUX unfolding?
Yeah, I would say that right now, OUX is a big part of our agency focus. So on the UX side, we kind of describe it as our engineers practice TDD or test-driven development, when they're very methodical and diligent about that. And anyone they hire has to have buy into that and also practice that and be willing to learn it if they don't know it already. And so OUX is kind of our TDD. So we have taken the approach of all of our projects, they're going to get some level of OUX. We'll probably dig into it more of how mix and matchy it can be, but definitely in our world where you have to go into a new client where, one client for 2 or 3 months, you're working in manufacturing. The next one, you're working in retail. The next one, you're working in aerospace. Like it's so varied. As an agency, we can't necessarily turn down work. We got to find the work that comes to us and that we can win. And we can't always be specialists in certain industries. So OUX is really our sort of secret power to get to speed super quickly. And a lot of clients have commented about that. And I think it's because we practice it in the same way that our engineers practice TDD, where it's the non-negotiable. We have to do it because we want to do it. And not only do our clients see the benefits of it, but we internally see the benefits of it as well because it helps us.
Yeah. So I think you wrote somewhere that the secret power for getting up to speed on new projects very fast and our clients notice. So this was like, I think some of my earliest wins of OUX, like when I started working this way, realizing how fast I could get up to speed with like really complex, sometimes esoteric, weird stuff, very kind of niche, industry specific. And I'd go and do some like secret noun foraging and come up with some cool questions. And I'd come back in 48 hours later, and I'd have all these questions of somebody that like maybe had been studying it for months or something. And they'd be like, what, how did you come up with these questions? These like the questions, and I like, so how does your business work? It was just like, nope, jumping straight to it. So y'all are both smiling and nodding. So, so what did the client say? How does that actually play out, or how does that feel when you can get up to speed so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I'll quickly.
Yeah,
I'll quickly read the quote that we have from one of our past clients in the animal health space that I think really speaks to that, and I'll let Kayla dive into the more specifics about kind of some of that process. But the client's quote was, "It's been impressive to see P-Tips Uplift team commitment to learn about and truly gain an understanding of the complex science and technology of our product. Their team understands more of the details than people who work in this field daily." And I think by that point, we'd maybe been on the project for 2 or 3 months.
So good. Kayla, what were you going to add?
Yeah, well, and we've had that happen with a couple clients as well. Another client said something very similar where after just a couple of weeks of really digging into their system and trying to document it and understand it, they said that we knew more about their business than people that had worked there for like 10 plus years. So I think that's really just a testament to, if you really want to understand something, try to document it, because it will immediately help you find where are those gaps, or where are there assumptions that need to be stress tested, or where do people have different ideas. You know, maybe this department thinks about this thing this way and this department thinks about this thing that way, but there's some sort of truth in there somewhere. Yeah. Or like in the UI even, you have to pick one thing to call the thing. So it's, yeah, a superpower for sure, being able to dig into really complex stuff and make sense of it.
It feels really good. I mean, I am not too much smarter than the average person, I don't think. I don't consider myself a genius, but I have been called a genius before because of this stuff. Of like, what are you, a genius or something? I'm like, no, I just have my little secret ORCA process. Secret, not so secret, because I'm always trying to get my clients involved as well. So tell me, actually, that leads me to my next question. How much do you involve your clients in the process, or is it more of an internal thing and then you present back to them the screens after you've gone through the process? Or do you object map with them? Do you build a nested object matrix with your clients? Ryan, you want to take this one?
I'll actually kick it over to Kayla, because I think she can talk about the Animal Health Project, because she did a lot of the diagramming with the client and, yeah, really involved in the process. I'd say just overall, though, we kind of talk about it, but not until later on. Like, this is how we do our UX process. So we just say this is how we do stuff, and this is how we're gonna do these workshops if we need client involvement. But otherwise, it's just, we don't really name it.
Okay, amazing. So tell me, before we kick it over to Kayla, tell me a little bit about this client. I know we're not going to name names,
Oh, sure.
But like this, you're saying animal health. Like, tell me about the complexity here that we were dealing with.
Yeah, so this client in the animal health space, they work a lot with basically pathogens, sequences. We got all the way down to like the nucleotides of DNA and how that can differ and how that determines one strain of a virus versus another strain. Then dove into like different animals. Like, is a strain potentially different for this type of animal versus this type of animal?
Junction object.
Yeah, exactly.
Strain by animal, junction object, maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, I joke that collectively between our team, we probably could have gotten a PhD in like microbiology or something like that.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And people have said before, they're like, I wish I had OOUX in college, because it would have helped me understand microbiology or whatever silly college course you're taking that's way too complicated. Yeah, so Kayla, talk to me about, what does client interaction look like? We don't need to call it OOUX, because we don't need to call it some fancy thing that people are gonna be like, why is it this new thing? What does it look like when you're collaborating, when you're integrating? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so we'll start the process by doing like noun foraging and gathering questions on our own, and are then able to bring that to clients. But like in this animal health project, when we would get into some of those really nitty gritty things like, okay, does a sequence belong to a strain? Does it belong to a specific gene segment of a strain of a pathogen? Like having to get into that level of like scientific detail, I would, sit down with our PO who has a PhD in microbiology and would just sit there and like move my little blue and pink and yellow sticky notes around to try to understand what he knows and map it in a way that seems true. We also, for this project, wanted to understand and needed to understand not only what the system was, but kind of how and when those different pieces showed up. So I ended up creating a task flow that mapped, like going from collecting like a saliva sample from an animal until you have the DNA sequence that you can then use to formulate your vaccine or whatever, and mapped out, okay, what steps happen, and then when that step happens, what objects show up, when do these certain attributes show up along this journey. Okay, now you took the sample and you tested it, so now we have a test object now, and that sample has a relationship to the test. So had to go through like that level of detail with them to really understand the complexity of it. Because part of this, it wasn't just designing the system that needed to handle this information, but also there was a customer-facing part of this as well, and they don't have this scientific understanding. So we had to understand it enough to then simplify it and show it back to them and be like, okay, this is what's actually important. Here's how you can be actionable on these things. So yeah, it was a lot of detail and bringing in clients into the diagramming when it made sense. But it kind of depends on the client how like forward facing all of that is.
That's amazing. Okay, so much that I want to dive into there. So one, when you're diagramming with them with your blue and pink and yellow sticky notes, is it more like you're asking them questions and you're just kind of like giving a visual aid to show it, but they don't really they don't know what blue versus pink versus yellow actually even means? Or did you teach them that? Or was it more like, I'm moving things around and the client's like, I feel really good about how you're moving those boxes around?
Yeah, it's a little bit more the second one. Like, I like how you're moving the boxes around. That makes sense to me. But I have had a few clients where I sent them, like we were working a little bit more asynchronously, and I sent them a diagram and they sent me one back where they like redid it. So it was cool to, like sometimes you'll find a client that also thinks that way and they're like, oh, I can kind of see what you're doing. I'll do it.
Yeah, and I love that for those listening that are like, oh, I couldn't bring this to my client. Maybe it's like I would have to really onboard them or give them like a 2-hour training on OOUX. You really don't have to do that. Like I used to think that. I used to be like, okay, now we're going to get trained in OOUX before we do anything together. And let me give you my 90-minute presentation. And then I found like there's something that Kathy Sierra talks about in Making Users Awesome, one of my favorite UX books. It's about just-in-time training, where it's like you just give them enough that they need to know to be able to collaborate with you. And so you can have those color-coded boxes and a client can just be like, that's cool. I like that you're doing some color-coded stuff and it seems very professional but like you're just talking me through it. Like even like I might be making an object map and they don't really need to know the ins and outs of the object map or like the difference between core content and metadata. They're just like, what I am saying is being captured in a visual way. And I feel good about that. So that is very cool for everybody to know that like it's scalable how much you bring the client in. And some clients are going to be like, ooh, let me build my own object map. That's cool. That's amazing. So, okay, OOUXC task flows. Okay. Did we teach this in the advanced program? So you're going to be, sidebar note, I will email you about what you might be able to share with us, even if it's like,
okay,
scrubbed or we sign an NDA or something, because I just would really be curious to see how you're doing this, because we only have a few examples. We've just started really turning the process inside out to be like, oh, you can, and it sounds like exactly what we've been building out of. Here's the steps of the process, and here's the objects and attributes that like star in each of these steps of the process. And
Yeah.
you could make an object map and then go into a task flow, or you could do like a task flow / journey map and use that for your
Mm-hmm.
foraging to push it back into a full out object map. So that's so cool. Did you do the object map first and then the task flow, or did the task flow inform the object map?
I'd say both. So I always start. So like I'll always do some noun foraging, attribute foraging, whatever at the beginning, just to like understand what problem states we're in at all. Like even just like picking out the nouns, I'm like, okay, we're dealing with this and that and this, and they kind of go together this way. This is the general thing we're working on, right? And then I'll usually do like some sort of like initial hot take object map of like, okay, this is what I pulled out from like your website and your onboarding documents and your product requirement documents or whatever. Here's what I think it might be looking like. But then we'll do that flow if there's like, especially if there's a lot of intricacies. But sometimes figuring out like how, especially things connect, will then inform it, because you'll be like, oh, this actually comes from this other place, so now we need the object that holds that attribute, or like, oh, these things connect here and now we need a junction to hold this thing with it. So I think they kind of inform each other, kind of like when you jumping ahead, but like when you get into like the representation round, you'll start sketching and be like, oh, I actually, now that I see it, I'm gonna change this thing about it, and they kind of, you kind of go back and forth between them. Yeah. So that's kind of how I've found the task flows to help as well.
Amazing. And that's really what we get into. I mean, when we go into the OUX masterclass, it's very much, here's the 16 steps of the process. We're going to teach them in order. We're also going to be like, you're going to remix them once you start getting better at it. And once you start practicing, you're going to be like, ooh, let me like jump to here and then jump to here and then jump to here. But you can also do them in order. And a lot of people like that in the beginning, because a lot of people come to OUX because they're like, I never know where to start. The process is chaos. My hair is always on fire. Just give me the process that I can kind of like use to contain all of my thinking. But then once you start playing with it, you start moving things around a lot more and like bending and flexing and remixing. So yeah, I'm excited for you to be going through the advanced program. You're going to love it. We're going to remix even more. Ryan, Kayla mentioned like some of the role, it sounds like there was a role that was like a customer role that is not a microbiologist. Did y'all have different roles on this project? Did you have the microbiologist role and then the layman role in this?
Kind of. I mean, I would say that even the layman version would be equivalent to like a doctor. So it's still somebody who's very smart, very educated. But I mean, when you're talking about like these certain things within microbiology, like there's going to be a certain specialty of people who have that focus, like people who are, like Kayla mentioned, like manufacturing vaccine, like have to know like all these different things that go into that to make that like scientifically sound, that people who are the equivalent of a doctor, like they have other medical things to worry about that's kind of not beneath them, but it's like this, they're on a different spectrum. And so it's funny you mentioned that though, because that's actually kind of where, as Kayla was mentioning, like that public facing side and why we needed to OUX this process a lot more, because we learned through interviews with those people that they had all the tools to diagnose and see all this data, but the data wasn't telling them what to do or wasn't really being very helpful. And I know you've talked about this before with like AI of like, okay, you can structure it and you can spit out an output, but if it's not giving me the context that I need, it's not very helpful. And so there's one person we talked to who mentioned like, basically need to take this information from going nerd friendly to business friendly, because the information would also then go up to people at the business level who are making the dollars and cents decisions. And then the people who were being asked to present this information would have to kind of make that justification to those people and have to then translate that information to them in a way that made sense. So in a way, we're kind of trying to help, by no means dumb it down, but definitely make it more tangible and contextual to, either ROI or just, do you need to make a change or not make a change, or what's the decision point here? And that's where that marriage between OUX and then especially our engineers, how they could slice and dice the data to make sure that we could actually project the right, I wouldn't even call it decision, but just the right information at the right time in the dashboard, and the public facing dashboard made the most sense.
So did y'all do some data viz in this project?
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Did you OUX your data viz?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Kayla,
I actually,
tell me
yeah.
more.
OUX, the
Tell me more.
data viz in this project, also worked with a client for like 6 months or so, where it was their entire product is data visualizations. So got to spend a lot of time digging into not only OUXing data visualizations, but OUXing dynamic data visualizations, and how do you design like a scalable design system for dynamic data visualizations, because there's lots of guidelines out there for like static data visualizations, but when it's like a system where like, oh, it starts as a bar chart and maybe I'm going to add this other comparison series to it, and now that's actually going to make more sense as an area chart, having a system behind it that can support all of that was something we spent a lot of time with.
And this is so funny because I remember when, like, how far we've come. Because I remember when you and I were having our one-on-one, and you're like, I'm struggling with, like, all these different attributes. I was like, I don't know, could you try, like, OUXing the data viz? And that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening more and more. I mean, it wasn't me that started doing it. It was folks in the program, in the community that were like, oh, I started applying this to the data viz. And then I started reverse engineering for the advanced course. I was like, okay, let me look at this data viz, this visualization that's actually really confusing for me right now. It was just a line graph for, I didn't know what it was for. It was something in real estate. And it was like, there was a number on the x-axis and there was a number on the y-axis, and then there was lines. And some of those lines were color coded. And even, what is a line? Oh, a line is a zip code. And then this is like what this is. So it's actually like what the thing was about, because it was all metadata, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it was price, it was date. So like date was on the x-axis, price was on the y-axis, and zip code were the color coded lines. And it was the average price of a listing for a zip code over time. But the object was the property,
Mm-hmm.
right? Actually, the object was the listing, because a property can have multiple listings,
Right.
right, over time.
Yep.
So it's actually the listing that is attached to the property. And that was not, and I was like, that's why this is confusing right now, because I'm seeing a bunch of information, but I don't know what is this information about? What thing is it actually about? And I couldn't click into it, right? So I couldn't look at a little point of, okay, this was the average price of listings in this zip code on this day, or this like time range. And that would have been really nice to click on it and see all those listings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was somewhere else in the app that you could do that. You could go to reports and type it all in and do all the little drop downs, and you could see that list. It just wasn't connected to the data visualization. So did y'all run into that? Oh, how do we make it clear what the thing is that this information is about? And were you able to do any of that, like actually letting people like click through to the actual things?
Remember how we did that? I believe a lot of the major data viz was on, I guess, what you'd call like the object detail page. And so I think Kayla, having gone through the past project where you held this metadata and was trying to data visit, and like having some confusion around like how do we know what object it's connected to, I think really informed this animal health project, because at that point we had all the attributes and the object map basically, and we knew what pieces of metadata we were taking apart and how, then it was just a matter of like, how are we going to visualize this? Like, we know we get all these values when this, whether it's core content or metadata is, and how we're going to visualize that, and how are we going to make it make sense. And so it was almost a way of just showing like, here's the full picture of the object, or the details of the object, and then you're going to have some basic information, some high level like metadata, but then you get into the more specific parts of like, but here's this piece of metadata, and here's all the different values it is, and showing it in bar graphs, things like that. And then even like time frame, I think we had one that was like a time frame graph.
So fun. I would love to. There's going to be a follow-up email. I'm going to be like, show me your stuff. So I want to go back, Ryan, to talking about working with the devs at P3, because y'all have in-house development and engineering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have something, I'm sorry, I have not heard of this. I feel like I've missed a memo. TDD?
Yeah, test-driven development.
Yeah, tell me more about that and how the devs worked with OUX. Like, how did y'all collaborate?
Yeah, so TDD is definitely way different than OUX. We always liken it to, what's it called, Kayla? Conceptual it's a conceptual objects. I can't remember what Josh described it as. He's like, oh, well, this isn't quite like object.
He said that. So TDD and what you're talking about are different things, right?
Yeah.
The thing that Josh was talking about was domain modeling.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
That's more equivalent to OUX in the engineering space.
Yes.
But TDD is more a practice of before they write code, they write some sort of test that's like
and
how this
domain
actually
modeling
works.
is usually referred to as DDD, domain driven design.
Yeah.
Okay, so TDD is different. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, you're fine. So yeah, TDD is more like they're writing like when I write this code and this function, it's going to do X, Y, Z, and so then they have like an outline of like this little piece of code should do this thing. I do it, and then I basically check to see that was I right or was I wrong, and if I was right, then it's good. Maybe change some stuff. If it's wrong, then I keep working it until it actually passes the test. And so then the idea is that you have all these tests, and then if you are shipping code, every day or every week or whatever that is, the code has to run through these tests to make sure it passes all the way through. And if there's ever an error or an issue, then it stops, and that we don't have like, oh, we took down the server for however long, or we have all these different issues. So it's kind of a way to like, it's not really a QA process, but it's kind of a way to make sure that one, you're documenting how your code works, and then two, preventing any sort of mishap in the deployment process.
Okay, so this is very much this is the developers in the developers world when they're coding.
Right.
This does not sound like a thing that you guys are involved in from a design perspective.
No, they're just very dogmatic about that, or very. That's how they work.
Have in common. It's the dogma.
Yes. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
the thing that you get to be dogmatic about. Okay, got you. So, do you collaborate with your developers when it comes to OOUX? Do they look at your object maps?
Oh yes, yeah. Usually when we
yes.
come in, we are like Kayla said, we're doing our noun foraging. Usually, because we've done it for a little while, we're kind of simultaneously also like attribute foraging as well, and kind of building out a rough sort of scaffold or content model, whatever you want to call it, of what we see this object sort of being. And usually that helps inform how our engineers start building out the database, or at the very least, like in the case of the animal health project, they're looking at the big clump of data and be like, okay, well, how are we going to start pulling these things out, and where do these things belong in these other sub tables underneath? So it's very, very collaborative early on, because a lot of what we're doing is very mirrored. It's two sides of the same coin.
Amazing. So you're getting them involved before screens. They see the object map, they kind of validate it and tell you maybe what doesn't work so well or what might work. Do you kind of like do prioritization with them at all from like a tech perspective of like, how much is this going to cost? Like, I find that connections often it's the R of Orca. We're like, ooh, like connecting these two things is going to be expensive, but do those conversations happen with your developers? Or like, I guess I'll ask a broader question. How does prioritization come in and kind of like road mapping, like with the animal health? Did OUX help you get to the scope of what you were designing first?
I think it helped the scope in the animal health project, because we practiced overall for our project, we practiced a model or approach called thin slicing, where you have this big North Star that we can design, but then how do we actually get there? We have to do incremental things end to end. So object mapping and looping in and prioritization kind of helps inform like, what's the first thin slice of work or the subsequent thin slices of work we have to do that's going to be valuable to the client, but also make sure that we're setting up the project itself for success. Because we always kind of go in with, I guess, that, paranoid mindset of like the client could run out of funding or the project could get scrapped. And so like, how do we make sure we're delivering something of value to the client that they can use? It's not going to be perfect maybe if they suddenly run out of funding or it gets scrapped, but at least it's a thing that they could leverage or could find some value in. So how can we make sure that we do that, as opposed to like, well, let's just build up the back end, make sure we have this nice database, and then like we go away and like all we have is the database, we can't really do anything with this.
Got it. Makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, and I think talking to the devs about the object map and framing it as more of like that conceptual model, I think that helps them kind of separate it, like understand that we're not dictating to them what they should be doing, but kind of allows them to be like, okay, this is what it eventually needs to do. Maybe I'm not building all of that right now, but I'm building it in a way where you could add this other stuff later.
Yes. So you're not painting yourself into a corner. Yeah. Yep. Before we close up here, I didn't know whether I was going to do this or not, but I think this would be kind of fun. It's just been on my mind. So Stone Sagala shared this with me from Reddit. I try to stay away from Reddit because it sucks my soul away. But this post really caught his eye and he sent it to me. And I kind of want y'all's thoughts on it. And yeah, what else do I want to say to frame this up? Okay, I'm just gonna read some excerpts of this. Okay. So this is from OP. So he says, today I absolutely crashed out, yelling at the top of my lungs. And this is in the UX design Reddit. What are they called? R Reddit?
Subreddit.
Subreddit. Yeah. This is in the UX design subreddit. And it got bubbled up to the top. It got a bunch of upvotes. So he says, today I absolutely crashed out, yelling at the top of my lungs to myself on my commute. I feel like I have so many things to try to figure out. The ambiguity, uncertainty, the back and forth, the inability to focus on a task for 10 minutes because I realized, oh, wait, I didn't think about this edge case. Or wait, I can't design this till I figure this out, but I can't figure that out until I design this. I'm a designer, research, reporter, strategist, a presenter, and a slave to meetings that give me 8 hours to design. I'm always anxious, feeling like I'm never moving fast enough. No one told me how isolating of a career field this is. Sure, I have a PM and developers on my team, but I'm mostly on my own ship, working in the future, trying to figure out the future problems while everyone else is in the present. There are many other UX designers at this company, but they're all on different teams working on different projects. I'm anxious all the time. I don't take lunch breaks, don't take time to meet people. I have a hard time laughing because I feel so scared. Pretty sure everyone I work with thinks I'm a shy, introverted person, which I'm not. I'm just so worried I can't do anything but work. And he goes on, it gets very dark, very isolated. And honestly, I feel like this is true for a lot of UX designers. This resonated to me because I was like, this was the beginning of my career. Honestly, like for OOUX, like it was really frustrating and it was tough. So I'm curious, like, what advice would you give to OP? What would you say to this person who is like drowning right now? Any advice, Kayla? What would you say to him?
Wow. Now, I don't want this to sound like I'm an OUX shill, but I honestly would recommend taking your course because that's also how I felt at the beginning. And I'm someone that, like, my brain is very disorganized. So I have to be, like, very organized outwardly. Like, I can have that kind of all or nothing mentality. And OUX really gives me a way to be like, okay, I just need to think about right now the nouns. That's all I need to think about. Then I can add this other piece on. It like really helps you break down, like hearing him talk about like, oh, there's all of these things and I haven't thought about this and I have to think about all of it all at once and I can't possibly do that. Yeah, you can't. And OUX really truly helps me break that, like be able to feel comfortable going into a messy space, going into talking to someone with a PhD in microbiology and trying to be like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Because it just lets you break it down and just get into like a small thing. You're like, I understand this small thing. And I can understand this small thing. I can just put it together.
That I understand how these
in like
things
a nice,
connect to each
calm
other.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. And, well, thank you for saying that. The reason that Stone sent it to me is because there was a lot of people in the thread recommending OOUX and it had gotten upvoted to the top. So he was like, this is cool. And then other people were like, OOUX is a scam, as they do in Reddit. People on Reddit love to think that OOUX is a scam. I'm just packaging existing UX and putting a fancy name on it to make boatloads of money because I'm just rolling in the money over here.
I can tell, yeah.
Man. So, but yeah, so I mean, and I would just, there was taking the course, but also just starting with what you were saying, like start with the nouns. If you're feeling overwhelmed and confused, so OP, if you're listening, just start looking at all the nouns within the problem space and start recognizing like, what nouns do I actually don't know what they are? Because that's often when you're confused, you're not really confused about the verbs or the adjectives. Usually you know what the verbs and the adjectives are. There's of course some industry specific verbs, but usually verbs carry across industries. It's the nouns that we don't really understand. Like what, like you used like sequence, like what the heck? I know what a sequence is in ConvertKit in my email marketing software, but I'm pretty sure sequence is different when what you're talking about. And how does it connect to what was one of the other objects that was in the animal health domain?
A pathogen.
Yeah.
A pathogen. What the hell is a pathogen in this context, in this software? So OP, what you can do is just start looking at all the nouns and thinking like, are these things synonyms? Are they? If they're not, if they are actually different, then how do they connect to each other? And then you can start asking questions, and that will actually start getting those conversations going so you don't feel so isolated. Ryan, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I would totally echo what Kayla said in terms of OUX. I feel like it's a thing that helps me feel more comfortable going to those complex conversations at a very broader level. I mean, I totally get where that person's coming from. I mean, I've shared this with Kayla before, but there's a project where I was working for Accenture around international shipping documents, and I was probably like a month and a half in. I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to understand like all these rules and regulations and how these things connect. And then somehow suddenly it did. But that's not a good strategy to like just hope and pray that I'm going to understand this. And so it gives you an opportunity to digest information better. I mean, in another example for a project, there's a time where I guess I'd also suggest saying that, even though you feel isolated, try as best you can to lean on your team members if that's a structure that you have at where you work. And I'll relay that I worked on a project that was for a utility construction company, and I was charged with doing the interface, but then I was like, yeah, but I don't really understand the math and how that works. And my boss or somebody was like, well, yeah, but we have people who understand the math. Like, you don't have to worry about that. Like, that's not your job to worry about that. And so there's probably a little bit of like, how much do you really need to know and learn? Like, did we need to become a PhD experts in microbiology? No, but we had to understand some of it because we had to visually communicate it out. But then there's other people on our team who also, from a technical standpoint, had to understand that part of the job. So it's totally valid, though. I mean, we're in a space right now where I'm seeing LinkedIn posts all the time about like, I have to do UI design, I have to do UX research, I have to do content strategy, I have to do front design and development, I have to moonlight and get my MBA on the off hours, I have to do all this, so many different things. And there are definitely some employers who are looking for that because they're so strapped for resources and money and people. But I also understand too that like up until OUX, like information architecture was not really something I was super like interested or really understood. I was like, oh yeah, information architecture, like make a sitemap and here's a navigation and here's the links that go under this category. But then with OUX, I understand like what information architecture really was. Like, I was like, okay, I can kind of get behind what's going on here. At least I have a better understanding of how I can make a app or website more intuitive as opposed to relying on navigation. Because I think you had the line, I think somebody else maybe had said it, but like the navigation is like the escape hatch, and so you can't really yeah. So
definitely.
You can lean on OUX for other things. So yeah, not to sound like a shill, but it's helped me understand a lot
shills,
more.
But you like OUX. That's why I'm having you on the podcast.
Yeah.
You usually don't have people on the podcast who are like, OUX sucks. Maybe I should, actually. If you think OUX sucks, email me or slide into my DM somewhere and we'll talk. I'll do a debate. So yeah, very, very cool. So I want to go back to Kayla, something that you said about like you have a very disorganized brain. So you have a very disorganized brain is what you said. So something that I hear a lot from people coming in to OUX is that I am neurodivergent. I've been called an overthinker. My mind is all over the place. And and I'm wondering if this resonates with you, but what I've been saying to people is you're not an overthinker. You are just a deep thinker, and deep thinkers need frameworks to channel all that thinking, right? So you are a deep and powerful thinker, but just like a powerful river without banks, like you're just going to become a flood, right? You're going to be a swampy flood. So if you have some good structure for all that deep thinking, you can actually be so much more powerful. You can get momentum when you have a framework, especially when that framework is like flexible and you can mash it up and you can be like, ooh, let me turn things inside out and do an OUX style task flow or apply this to data viz. So you're nodding, but does that resonate, this idea that this is a framework to channel the deep thinking that makes it feel like your thinking isn't just like going in every single direction?
Yes, totally. Like, yeah, I think sometimes, especially when you're dealing with a complex space, it can feel like you have to have all the answers and you need to be able to figure it all out right away. Mm-hmm. And it feels big and scary and you don't know where to start. And this gives you a place to start and gives you a structured way to go through it. And it just, it makes it feel reasonable. And like you can bite off these small chunks and you know where to go next. Or if you don't, like, you know what questions you have now and you know what you need to figure out, instead of being like, I can't possibly figure out everything that needs to happen and I don't even know who to talk to and I don't even know what words to say. So it really helps to like rein it all in and make it feel more doable and like structured, like just this part, then just this part, instead of feeling like I have to do it all at once.
Setting yourself up to succeed. And I think that's what's happening with OP, our friend on Reddit, is probably one of those deep thinkers. Like you can tell, like he is stressed out because he's trying to figure out all the edge cases and realize, wait, if I go in down this direction, then it's going to move this thing over here. So he's got that system thinking DNA, right? Of trying to think about all the pieces. And I was like, OOUX is not for the type of person who's just, I'm really good at just sweeping things under the rug. Just like dancing along the surface and making things pretty. That's not the OOUXer. The OOUXer is the person that is suffering out there because they're just like, or the potential OOUXer is the person that is suffering out there because they are trying to figure out all the things. And Ryan, something you said is it's this both and. Yes, like OOUX can help us become a subject matter expert overnight. It can help us ask all these great questions. But also it helps us realize that like we can provide so much value without being the one that has to figure everything out, right? Like we actually don't have to have all the answers. We can ask really good questions while we move our boxes around, right? And everybody else is actually coming up with the answers. We're just asking the good questions and then documenting the answer and making sense of it so that everybody else can understand.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I experienced that with my current client that I'm on, where there's in the manufacturing space, and I was like, well, what's this thing mean over here? And people will give the answers. They just need a way to document it, and being the person to kind of be that facilitator and visually show what everyone's thinking is, I think it's a very underrated skill, and it's definitely a huge part of the OUX methodology. But just being able to, like Kayla said, like, yeah, you're putting information on the page in a way that makes sense to me visually, like, okay, cool. Like that's really all you need. And if you can do that, then you can totally, help yourself digest it as well and become that subject matter expert, I guess.
Yeah. And like a servant leader, like you're helping everybody else be smarter by asking the right questions so that like their expertise can be extracted and captured. But if we can do that breaking down of the complexities, okay, here's all of our moving pieces, right? Are these all of our moving pieces? Yep. Okay, cool. All right, maybe not. Let's think how these things connect. Does this thing connect to this, or does this thing connect to this, or what's the proxy relationship? All that good stuff. Asking those questions, bringing people beneath the surface. Like we don't have to be the one with all the answers. We can just be the facilitators of coming up with the answers, which is really fun, really rewarding, and people find a lot of value in it once you can start making that happen. So, okay, so we've gone over time. Thank you so much for being here. Tell me a little bit before we wrap up, tell me about P3. What kind of clients do y'all take on? Definitely clients that are excited about OOUX, I'm guessing, but do you have any type of industries? And is there anything else you want to talk about P3 and send people toward your agency?
Yeah, so we are P3 Plus Uplift. We are in Des Moines, Iowa, like you said. We take on really any kind of clients that need custom software, but also that research up front. Like if you have a great idea, or I've been involved in projects where enterprise companies have needed to prioritize what things do they work on, we can help do that research to understand, well, what makes sense to your customers? What do they need? What are the pain points? Even if it's internal users, what do they need? We can do the full gamut from research all the way to executing that custom software from a web app or a mobile app or any other kind of in-between type thing. I would say that OUX definitely lends itself well to, this new AI world we live in. So if you are struggling with how you can adopt AI, you can definitely leverage some OUX, and we can help you kind of figure out what that looks like. Industry-wise, being in Iowa, it's definitely ag, insurance, finance, but we do some fun things every now and then. Some clients either in retail or just in like sports, entertainment, things like that. I would say if you're a startup or if you're an enterprise business leader, both those, I'd say it's a mix 50-50 of who we work with. That work kind of ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's really heavy on the enterprise business side. Sometimes it's in the startup side. We love startups because they have these like really cool, crazy animal health type challenges that come across. But, we've definitely worked on some pretty meaty and juicy enterprise business projects as well that have definitely leveraged OUX.
I mean, it sounds like y'all kind of specialize in complexity too, like in finance and insurance and, and DNA stuff for animals. So really cool. That's
Yeah,
gonna
you're in a heavily regulated industry. We will help you.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And also if you are like interested in OOUX and you kind of want it done for you, but being able to be on the client side, yeah, bring Kayla and Ryan in. I'm sure that they would love to help. And we'll do a follow-up episode definitely on AI and OOUX. My curiosity is piqued. I'll let y'all play with that for a few more months and then I'll loop back to you to come back on the show to talk about that. So thank you so much for being here, y'all. Everybody listening, happy OOUX. Kayla, Ryan, you are amazing. Kayla, I will see you a lot in September. And y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Happy OUXing.
Thank you so much for listening to the UX Level Up podcast. If you want to connect with me, Sophia, please follow me on Instagram at SophiaVUX, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Sophia Prater. I'm pretty easy to find there. Our music was brought to you by Ruby Vell, courtesy of Sugaroo Records. Thanks again for listening.